Well, hello there, everyone. Growing up, there's plenty of games that have at least a 30% chance of playing a role in your life if you had video games at all growing up, be it Mario, a God of War, a Halo, or maybe something like Half-Life. However, while not a universal experience, I think most of us have that one random game we stumbled upon that no one else had seemingly ever heard of. Not necessarily a great video game, mind you, but one that stands out. And for how much I love the Ys series, I'd say it's carved out enough of a niche that it's not that remote. So my actual weird game that miraculously spawned in would have to be a Nintendo DS action RPG known as From the Abyss. An interesting little dungeon crawler that's main appeal was some nifty little combinations you could create with your different skills and magic spells and weapons and all that fun stuff. Looking at it objectively, this game is probably the most 6 out of 10 experience you could have, but hey, it was a nifty little game from my childhood, so I decided to see if it would fit a video for worst difficulty spikes. Yeah, it did. But also, after that fight was done, I was having enough fun that I just kept on playing for the hell of it, and before I knew it, the game was beaten, so I'd say, hey, it's got a decent selection of bosses, so without further ado, I'm going to be ranking these bosses from worst to best, while also using tiers, though, spoilers, we won't be seeing the amazing tier on this list because as much as I did enjoy this game, well, it's not exactly the high art. Number 9, Abyssal Cocoon. Yeah, as much as I may have crapped on the Dust Golem, at least it feels more like an actual boss fight. The Abyssal Cocoon is the worst of both worlds. Initially, the boss just sits there and lets you attack it, but once it loses a bit of HP, it's going to start bombarding you with dark spheres that are timed just frequently enough that they sometimes stun lock you. Except they also do so little damage that eventually you'll get knocked out of the combo. But the base version also has so little health that you can easily one-shot him with the Axe's spin to win skill. But the post-game enhanced version of this boss fight has entirely too much HP to the point that it takes forever to kill and it's still attacking you at the same frequency. And no, the fight doesn't have anything else other than more HP, so it still does no damage. The fight is just a waste of time. This is the one boss that honestly should have just been completely cut from the game, especially since there's already a boss in this dungeon. Number 8, Dust Golem. I got a whole ass video talking about why this fight sucks, but essentially it's a boss that's positioned at the worst possible point in the game, because if it was the 3rd or 4th boss after you unlocked some worthwhile equipment, good magic, and increases to your weapon proficiency, it could have been pretty good and maybe even fun. But instead you're just stuck chipping away at a boss that admittedly looks pretty cool, but has the capability to one-shot you out of nowhere because this game is unbalanced, when its distinct lack of invincibility frames can be a real problem here. And it's kind of funny because outside of one other boss, this is like one of the only really hard fights of the game. And after this, a lot of the difficulty kind of just goes from being moderately difficult, if that, to piss baby easy. I don't have much else to add to this fight, as I already made a full video in worst difficulty spikes talking about this boss battle, so I don't see the need to keep talking about him from this point on. Number 7, Minotaur. The first boss of the game isn't much better. In fact, he really only has one attack. Technically 2 attacks, but really just one attack. And that's swinging his axe at you. Or he can roar and dash towards you before swinging his axe at you with the exact same range. So you can choose to either wait between each axe swing or try and outrange him with a bow and arrow. And you can't really keep the pacing of the fight going because you don't have any backstep or other sorts of dodge skills available at this point, so it's just running in and hitting the boss while dodging his one attack, or face tanking it if you want to. Kind of just a meh boss fight that exists to get the game started, and even other characters in the game have been able to kill this Minotaur, so he's not really treated as a big deal, he's just kind of the first thing you fight. Number 6, Dark Umbrella. The 6th level of the game is kind of where the game's plot just stops, and while the music and levels are pretty cool, the story doesn't even try. But this boss is just a random monster, and after killing 3 big heavy hitter bosses that had a lot to do with the story, I don't know, it just feels kind of out of place. Honestly, you can pretty easily kill this boss in under a minute with the right build, but I chose to go for using an axe because it's a little bit more fun once you finally get some proficiency boosts. As for the boss, well, he's not very interesting. He can fire out little spikes, spread water bubbles which effectively do the same thing as his spikes, and leave behind poison clouds to punish over-aggressive players, and that's about it. Okay, I lied, because I learned this on this playthrough that below half health he does gain a new attack where he shoots out lightning bolts in 8 directions, which does look cool. But not only is it tied to him being below half health, it must not be a very common move for him to use either, because it was my first time ever seeing the attack. It's not one that's going to come up too often. And honestly, the boss's design ain't really doing itself any super big favors either. It just looks kind of okay in like an early game boss, but no, we're over halfway through the game at this point. Number 5, Scarlet. Scarlet is one of the game's bosses that has a lot more story going on. Level 3 through 5 are where the game at least tries to have more of a plot, so the fights tend to stand out more. In this case, Scarlet was one of the kingdom's young mages and an apprentice of the old lady Razmita, who was your fortune teller that you've been acquainted with in the game. But during a monster attack, she lost both of her parents, so after slaying the dust golem, she decides to go into the abyss in a fit of rage to get revenge, and she paralyzes Helen the gatekeeper and enters the abyss, well, intent on getting her revenge. However, it does not go well, as at some point she gets possessed by a monster in the abyss and ends up becoming its host and having her body mutate into that of a monster herself, and when we finally see her, well, she retains her sense of self, but it's clear the monster has already won the fight, so now we just have to do battle and mercy kill her. As for the fight, it's not bad, albeit not amazing. She's the first boss to really be magic focused, with her loving to spam ice bullets that can paralyze you, which is a neat detail as this is the same sort of attack she used to paralyze Helen, and she can also dash up to you and bonk you on the head with her staff. Unfortunately, that really seems to be all she does. I swear I remember her having fire pillars and other elemental attacks she could use, but I didn't see her use them at all across the 4 times I fought her, so I don't know, maybe it's stuff she only uses in the game's roguelike spin-off, Anonymous Notes from the Abyss, and not here, I'm not sure. The fight is basic, but a large step above the first 2 bosses, and it has a much bigger impact on the story as well, because after you kill her, there's a much bigger impact in the story, as many people like Daisy are going to hate you for killing Scarlet, while others understand she was too far gone. It's a bit more impactful of an ending than, hey, good job, you slew the monster, now let's go to the next one. Number 4, Abyss Demon King. At the end of the game is the final boss fight against the Abyss Demon King, and while I tend to have a bit of a bias towards final bosses, that is not the case for this guy at all. I will say he does look pretty cool and is kind of intimidating at first, but as a fight, well, it doesn't really work. A lot of his attacks come out so fast they're practically undodgeable, like his hand slams or his white bombs. Meanwhile, his meteor magic attack goes on for so long it's going to be near impossible to dodge once it starts overlapping with his other attacks, so there's no real escalation or second phase to the fight either. So this is basically just a shit show of a boss fight. So this battle must be completely unfair, right? Well, no, it's oddly balanced because all of these attacks do so little damage that face tanking them isn't an issue, which I'm not sure how I feel about. Meanwhile, his giant mouth laser does do very heavy damage, but it is the one well-telegraphed attack in the fight, so it gets a pass from me, and it's kind of the cool attack. I will give him some points. The idea of needing to break one of his arms so his head falls down and is vulnerable is neat, but the arms have some points that sometimes they're just intangible. However, they're not counted as proper bosses like the head, so they're not immune to status effects, and if you were to, say, poison his arms, which have infinite HP and they just fall down when they take enough damage, then he'll very often be stunned out of his attacks and be left helpless as you wail on him, so the big scary final battle feels awkwardly easy. But it still wraps back around again to him being kind of cool because he's kind of a fun playground to unleash all your best skills on, while also having an amazing final boss theme to accompany the battle. Number 3, Fallen Knight Rusio. Well, it took us until the top 3 to get to any good bosses, but at least we got there. Now let's get this out of the way. Rusio was fought at the end of the Rotten Sea, and as you'd guess from a name like that. But as for the fight itself, it's not bad. He has some slash combos that come out really quickly, but backstep actually has a purpose for once against it, and there's also his sword beams he can fire out that stop you from just zoning him out, and at half health he gains the ability to go shadow mode and quickly dash towards you while extending his combos in other sorts of ways. He's a simple but effective knight fight, and probably the hardest boss in the game that I would consider fair. But he gets most of his points for the story. See, Rusio is a well-renowned hero of the Kingdom of Rubinat, but unfortunately he came across a vicious monster in the Abyss that attacked him and his squadron, and while he was able to rescue a few of his companions, he was nowhere to be seen afterwards, and as the game goes on, you can speak with his fiancée Finea and his sister, and, well, seeing how they're becoming more and more distraught until the news is broken that Rusio was found, but he's kind of become a monstrous shell of his former self. If this sounds at all like Artorias from Dark Souls 1, yeah, I thought so too, but this game came out first, so I'm giving credit here, I guess. And after that order is given, well, you have to strike him down. And after doing so, the other characters aren't exactly happy with you. They understand it's a mercy kill, but, I mean, you're not exactly going to be on great terms with everybody for a while. Finea becomes delirious after her fiancé's dead, Daisy states she outright hates you for killing her brother, and Gamel, well, he understands that you had to do it, but also he says it's pretty hard to talk to you right now. Story-wise, this is probably the most impactful boss in the game, and while it is a necessary mercy kill, it's not one that anyone's going to be happy with you for when it's said and done. Number 2, Wind Giant. The Wind Giant is another boss fought in the endgame, with the plot just stops. But at least this guy has a pretty awesome fight to make up for it. For those looking for a tough melee battle, you'll find it here, with multiple punching attacks that make their own earthquakes, blades of wind, and flying punch combos with the ability to inflict skill seal, which makes it much tougher to just burn him down, so he can be a pretty tough boss battle. Then, for his second phase, he's able to create much larger wind blades, he can fire out, and more notably is his biggest attack being this massive tornado that can suck you in. It is one of the more visually impressive attacks in the game. In terms of raw mechanics, he might be the best fight in the game, but it's basically irrelevant in the story, and depending on how you allocated your stats, he might be a little too easy to just tank and spank, but it's still a very respectable in-game challenge, and it's a fun time. I like it. Number 1, Cerberus. I mean, looks more like Orthrus to me, but whatever. Remember how I talked about Rusio being a fallen hero and compared him to Artorias? Well, here's the Manus of the game. The Flaming Demon is built up as the primary threat of the story, being the abyssal monster responsible for slaying many people and turning some of them into monsters, and unlike other foes, he's treated as a highly intelligent and highly dangerous threat. As for the fight, well, he's able to jump around the arena quickly and loves to use fire, whether that be just basic fireballs, standing in the lava and unleashing massive waves of fire, getting up on top of the, well, hills and carpet bombing, or what else have you. Basically, everything in the arena is on fire, and he's one of the most aggressive bosses in the game, with one of the most dynamic arenas. Phase 2 doesn't see much of a change outside of increasing the amount of fire he unleashes, but that's not a bad thing, as this boss is kind of at the end of bosses being a significant threat to the player with their damage output. So it's a cool looking boss with a dynamic arena, and he works well as the big villain throughout the first half of the game's narrative, and I like the detail how the best way to fight him is with Rusio's weapon, as it deals bonus damage against him. Overall, it's one of the most enjoyable bosses in the gameplay front, and it brings the game's most interesting storyline to a strong conclusion, making for, in my opinion, the best fight in the game. From the Abyss isn't an amazing game, but it's a pretty nifty one, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't get any enjoyment out of this replay. The customization is neat, the dungeon crawling can be fun, the music is really good, and the story is pretty well written, at least up to the boss fight against Cerberus. After that point, the plot kinda just stops. But still, it's a game I had fun with, and I can think of worse ways to kill a weekend. That's all I've got for this video. If you want to see more content of varying quality, consider liking, subscribing, and hyping the video, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, take care.